Is there a secret to editing your first draft or second draft or 17 draft? I don't know. But I am convinced that we should see editing as writing. Welcome to How to Write Good. I am your host, Daniel Poppie. You can find out more about me at danielpoppie.com. If it is your first time here, How to Write Good is a writing podcast that seeks to find principles and advice that can be applied across a broad range of writing situations. If you've been here before, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button below, and share. So you've gone through the process of planning your book, and you sat down and you took a month or 3 months or 3 years to write your first draft. And now you're on to the editing process. Now, if you haven't checked out my episode on how I edit and the different steps I go through, check it out right here or down below if you're listening to this on audio, because I think that'll give you a good foundation as you think about editing. But for now, we're just going to be talking about my perception of editing. And of course, since I have this specific perception of editing, I think everybody else should have this perception of editing, because that's how having an idea works. So as I said before, you might be sitting down to a computer screen, or maybe you write in notebooks, and you're looking at your first draft and you're thinking, how the heck am I going to get through this? And how am I going to take this piece of crap and turn it into a polished book? Some may be even thinking they don't know how to edit. Here is the secret about editing, and I kind of already let it out of the bag at the intro of this episode, but editing follows the same rules as writing. Maybe this is controversial, or maybe I just think it's controversial, but I would go so far as to say that editing is writing. It might not look exactly like what we think writing is, but unless you're dealing with something other than the content of your text, I think it's writing. Think about it this way. When you read through your first draft and you start editing, that draft is like clay that you can shape into whatever you want. And I think that you should treat it that way. No matter how much you like something, it is not sacred. And if it doesn't serve the story you are telling, you should probably take it out. Now, you may be still thinking to yourself, but that doesn't make editing writing. You're not supporting this idea of editing being writing. But what do you do in editing? Here are a few different things that I do every single time I edit. I move sentences around. I shift where they are. I shift which spot of the paragraph they're in. I even sometimes shift which paragraph they are in. I change specific words in sentences, or I even change phrases in sentences. Sometimes I rewrite entire paragraphs. That actually happens more than I probably think. And I've even been known to splice sentences and paragraphs together. The goal of this is to get to good writing, and I'm manipulating the words, the paragraphs, the chapters, and the entire book, the text of the entire book, that is, to get to good writing, and in the end, get to a good story. If that's not writing, I don't know what is writing. Because even if you're not writing down every single word, you're doing such manipulation of the words that are already on the page that you're sometimes changing the meaning of a section completely, or changing the flow of a section, or changing how things come across to the reader. In our initial first draft writing, I think that this parallels what we're doing in our editing process, because within our first draft, we have big ideas in our mind, and we're taking those ideas and we're trying to refine them on the page. We're trying to put them into actual words. Well, when we're in our editing process, we're taking what we have on the page and we're trying to take them and put them into actual words, or into different words, or reorganize them in a way that's going to convey what we're trying to convey. And I don't see much of a difference besides the fact that I'm taking ideas from my brain and I'm taking ideas that are already written on the page. In some cases, some very prominent writers actually say you should rewrite the book entirely to try to refine. So they even go further than where I go, because they think that you should start at square one again and rewrite a complete new draft. I don't go that far because I do have this perspective on editing. I think everything is malleable in editing, and because I'm not tied to one thing in editing, I can change things into what they need to be. But I think these big authors do not have that same perspective, so the only way they can get out of the structure they've created with their first draft is by starting that first draft process again. Now, that may be the best way to do things for you. You may be stuck in your head too much. You may be stuck in the structure of what you've first written in that initial draft. And I'm all for doing what you need to do to get to the final book, to get to that end product, to get to the polished piece, if you will. But what is the point of actually having a first draft if you don't use that first draft and build off of it? If you don't use the pieces you've already put together? I've said in the past that writing is kind of like sculpting. When you get the first draft written, you're not done with the process. You've given your art the basic shape of what it is going to be. And then you keep on working on that shape and give it details until it looks lifelike, until you have a final polished piece. When a sculptor switches from that basic shape to adding details, he is still sculpting his piece. He is using the basic ideas and skills he had before to make that piece better and better and better. And in the same way, when a writer switches from doing his first draft to editing to getting closer and closer and closer to a finished book, he is still using the same skills. He is still using the same knowledge. He is still using the same principles to get to that end result. It does look different at this point in the writing process, but it is the same for the person sculpting. The sculpting process looks a little different when you get closer to the end goal. At some point, you start to polish things. Some people start to sand things depending on what medium they're working in. And it's the same with writing. But again, the basic principles of good writing and good storytelling do not change despite the part of the process you are within. If you enjoyed this, you're probably wondering how you can support me. Well, you can actually do two simple things. Follow the first link below to grab a copy of my book, and then follow the second link and sign up for my newsletter. It's that simple. Those two things will mean the world to me and give me more time to write books and create content for you. As always, my name is Daniel Poppie, and this is How to Write Good.